What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States.
25% tariffs that the president announced on imported cars as well as parts starting next week.
For some automotive industry economists, the unthinkable has happened. 30 years of free trade across North America virtually wiped out by a single executive order.
Of course, I don't think anyone could have foreseen this happening.
There are all kinds of unintended consequences that will fall into place.
One executive in the industry texted me earlier and he said, this is going to drive the auto industry into a recession.
While there are a lot of possibilities and much is unknown, one thing's for sure. Cars are about to get more expensive in the U.S. Some may even be pulled from the market entirely.
If we see prices going up as a result of costs going up either on vehicles or parts, that means that the consumer is going to have a harder time affording these vehicles. And we estimate you could see a 2.5 to over 3 million unit hit.
Now, I wonder if this applies to U.S. cars. We'll keep watching.
We have to invest in new plants. We have to invest in new assembly lines. We have to find new suppliers. This is going to drive some small suppliers out of business. This is going to cost more to build vehicles. This is going to eliminate entire segments of vehicles from the pipeline.
All of that will likely take years to execute. Analysts say the US can't even build really cheap cars domestically. While a lot of automakers, foreign and domestic, have factories in the US, almost half of all vehicles are imported from other countries: Canada, Mexico, and countries across Europe and Asia. Not everyone is going to be affected the same. Ford and Stellantis, for example, build 74 to 80% of their US market vehicles at home. GM, less than half. But every car has at least some of its parts or materials made or procured outside the US. And even companies less affected are likely to charge more.
The United States loses all the things that Canada and Mexico bring to the table. Canada has a great wealth of natural resources, and Mexico offers great workers and a lower cost. We're able to compete with the EU and better compete with China. And when you consolidate it to just the US, our volume isn't there.
So half of the U.S. cars are made in U.S. So I'm going to think that even U.S. cars are going to be affected by this. But let's keep watching and see.
Of course, the news comes at a time when average transaction prices are near record highs. And for those that already own a car, they're falling behind on car loan payments. In fact, 6.6% of subprime borrowers were at least 60 days past due on their loans as of January 2025, the highest ever.
Americans are currently having trouble paying for the cars they already have. Add $5,000 to the average vehicle price, and we're going to see more defaults on car loans than we already are seeing.
Experts say prices will rise on average about 15 to 20% for cars that are either assembled outside the US or contain parts from other countries. That works out to about a $6,000 price increase, again, on average. It will hit just over half of the 50 best-selling cars in the US and about half of cheaper models, from $40,000 on down. Prices on cars that aren't directly affected by the tariffs are still expected to rise at least 5%, according to Cox Automotive. The average transaction price, meaning the average price actually paid for a car in the US, was just shy of $50,000 in February.
Wow.
But once you eliminate the low end of the market, the simple math throws that average way up, and we're going to quickly see that average price crest $50,000 and go way beyond that.
So would they say 20% or so more, 20-30% more for foreign cars, and even domestic cars, since parts are made here, are going to go up 5%. 5% doesn't sound, I mean, that's not tremendously bad, but still, it's bad enough. What do you guys think? Leave a comment.
What that means is that all of the cheapest new cars in the US are now at risk of being wiped out. That's because just about all of them are made in either Mexico or South Korea. This includes the Chevrolet Trax and Chevy Trailblazer, the Nissan Sentra and Nissan Kicks, the Buick Envista and the Buick Encore GX. It also includes models from Ford, such as the Bronco Sport and Maverick.
When you build a Nissan Sentra in Mexico, you build that for the Mexican market, you build that for the Brazilian market, you build that for the American market. And so that combined volume gets you to a level where the economies of scale make sense to build so many vehicles and sell them in the United States at $25,000. If you build them in the United States with a tariff, Brazil's not going to accept those vehicles that are that expensive. Mexico's not going to want them back.
Think about it like this. General Motors is the largest US-based automaker by volume, but many of its models are made in other countries, including its cheapest, the Chevrolet Trax and Chevy Trailblazer. Both are shipped from Korea. So both will get slapped with a 25% tariff. That basically leaves GM with one choice. How much, if any, of the tariff do they absorb?
So it looks like I was thinking maybe we go out and buy the cheap cars, even if we're going to get hit with that tariff. But now they're saying no, the cheap cars are the ones that are going to get hit as well. So that's not a good idea either.
The more you risk a drop in demand. If a car costing $25,000 goes up to $30,000, which is totally possible, it may not be affordable for the segment of the population that are looking in that price range, or worth the price. So then, of course, volume drops.
They have to make some really tough decisions on how do they make up that difference in volume.
Then GM has to go back and say, do we have to build this vehicle at all? If they eliminate that vehicle, then the consumer now has no choice than to buy a used vehicle.
That can only mean that used vehicle prices are going to rise too.
That was my exact thought as well. If you can't buy a new car, right, then suck it up and maybe buy a good used car. But now he's saying that used car prices are going to go up. So there's no alternative. Either get screwed by the new car or get screwed by the used car. What do we do? What are your thoughts? Leave a comment.
The same thing during the pandemic. In fact, while used cars are cheaper than they were in the worst of the COVID years, they are still way above 2019 prices.
When we went through COVID, we know that we lost about 10% of the new vehicle market. We gained some in the higher income quintiles, people who could pay more. So we gained buyers in the higher cost vehicles, but we lost a solid portion of consumers that were able to buy in the new car market.
It's not just cheaper cars though, it's also some of the most popular, like the Toyota RAV4 and Honda CR-V.
You got a lot of unhappy customers out there who are Honda through and through loyalists who aren't going to be able to potentially find their vehicle if they need one right now.
The CR-V is actually one of the 5 models most affected when you multiply the number of cars sold by the cost of the tariff on each car. Others include the Chevy Trax I mentioned earlier, and the Honda HR-V, the Chevy Equinox, and the Subaru Forester. Each sell well over 100,000 units a year in the United States alone.
They think that if you put a 25% tariff on all vehicles, we can bring a lot of manufacturing back here to the United States. And that may be possible, but in the interim, it's going to create a lot of pressure.
So why can't we just build factories here? Well, supposedly that's the purpose of all of this. But building a factory in the US takes at least 2 or 3 years and costs at least $1 billion, realistically closer to $2 billion. Just retooling an assembly line, one assembly line, costs about $500 million and several months.
This does not happen with just the flip of a light switch.
So the idea is, hey, we don't want to pay these big tariffs. Let's move the manufacturing plants here, which is the idea of the Trump administration, of Donald Trump, and so that we build everything here. But the idea is what he's saying is that it's going to cost a lot more to do that than not to do that. So either way, any which way, it's not good, it seems.
Even if there's excess capacity in certain factories, it will still take a matter of time for them to potentially retool if it's not the same exact vehicle they'd be running down that production line, and things like that, and gathering back the workforce and so forth. So it's a little bit of it's a very complex decision that companies would need to make on that capital expenditure, especially if it's being made around things that are policy oriented, which of course we know can be fickle every 4 years.
All right, there you have it, guys. Car prices are going up no matter what, no matter what we do. So if you're thinking about buying a car anytime soon, maybe you should think twice. Leave me a comment below on what you think. How are you going to handle this situation, right? And it's not only car prices that are going up now with all these other tariffs, other things might be going up. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel when we talk about those things, and hit that like button if you like this kind of conversation, and please leave a comment below. Right now it's a small channel, so I reply back to every single comment, and we'll have a good, thoughtful conversation on this. So make sure you check out one of these videos here, because that's the next big conversation we're going to have, and I'll see you there. Peace.